Quick introduction of myself. My name is John Samuel. I've been working with Erlang Solutions for almost 7 years, so a bit of an old timer here. Um, Been heading up the globally distributed Erlang and Elixir projects for the last few years, and then also heading up our efforts on RabbitMQ. That's me. So thank you everybody for joining us today on today's session. Um, this is obviously an ask us anything session, so it's a real opportunity to poke around what the guys have been doing, what we've been doing with RabbitMQ. Um, so, but we'll try and divide it up between sort of our past workings with Rabbit, what we're currently doing, and sort of future. So we'll try and get get that get that going in terms of that. But let me start that off though, because the past 12 months, certainly since the last Code Beam America, a lot has happened. It's been a pretty unique year. So I'd like to ask Karl. I mean, last 12 months, what's been happening? How is how's the pandemic affected the development of Rabbit? Or maybe it hasn't. Maybe it's taking things forward.
Well, yeah, well, of course, everyone has been busier, especially pretty much everyone, but many of us have children, so we've had them around for quite some time of that last 12 months. But we are a fully remote team, and have been for many years. So in terms of working from home, it's not really been a problem. We've been, there was no adjustment for us. It was everyone around us that had to adjust to being around more. But no, we've made good progress. We've not particularly slowed down because of it, or at least not massively.
Okay, thank you. And Ayanda, how have the last 12 months?
Last 12 months. Yeah, it's been a bit different. I think with our side of RabbitMQ work, there's a lot of on-site consulting, on-site training. So yeah, that face-to-face interaction with the client hasn't been as often as it was. But I think we've managed to cope with the changes with the remote work, and it actually seems like there's been actually more work over the last 12 months. It's been yeah, a lot more busier with consulting work, feature development, and yeah, quite a lot of RabbitMQ activities. Yeah, so
Fantastic.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayanda. So, right with the questions, we've already got one question come through. This particular question has come in from David Lucia. David, do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, sure. And actually, it cut me off halfway, so I only put half of the question into the app. So this is a question around a need that we have at the company I work for, SimpleBet. And we use RabbitMQ and AMQP to deliver data to our customers. We've found a need to selectively filter data when it's sent to our customers. So our setup is that we have a vhost and an exchange, at least one exchange that we provision per customer. And then upstream of that, we have a headers exchange that our producer writes to. And we have a shovel that we selectively bind headers to. And we use that for the filtering mechanism. Now, we don't love this implementation, particularly because rewriting the bindings on the fly seems a little bit scary at times, especially if you're doing it during a heavy write period. So I wanted to know if you were going to implement filtering at an exchange level, How would you do that?
So,
And I can clarify because that was a lot.
so Ayanda, do you want to try and break that one up?
Yeah. So firstly, I mean, with you did mention like creating bindings on the fly. I'm not sure if you've tried playing around with the Federation plugin because once you're incorporating Shovel and looking to have some logic around your bindings, that's basically in Federation. When you create bindings you've got the concept of the upstream and downstream, and basically what you create on the exchange level is replicated on your upstream. So I would say, the first thing there is probably also consider using the Federation plugin because you get a lot more flexibility, right? And then in terms of filtering on the exchange level, I mean, the default exchanges which RabbitMQ provides you with, I mean, they do fit quite a lot of use cases, right? But you can also implement your own exchange using the plugin interface. So there's quite a lot of custom exchanges. I don't know if you've tried going that route.
That was a last resort for us, as it seemed a little bit of a scary path. So I don't know if that's pretty common to implement your own exchange type.
It's quite common, but yeah, I mean, the headers exchange does provide you filtering. So I don't know, can you just touch on the type of filtering that you want to carry out on the exchange again?
Yeah, so imagine we have different classes of data, and there are certain types of data that we never want to get to our customer, and we don't want to add complexity on the publisher side.
Okay.
So we'd really like to keep all of the complexity of what data goes to which customer downstream of the producer.
Okay.
So the Federation plugin is something that I don't believe we've looked into deeply. So we'll have to take another look at that. Custom exchanges is something that we've thought about. We've tried this path out first as it seemed a little bit simpler.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, even with the exchange itself, in terms of like bindings, right? I don't know if you've even tried like playing around with exchange to exchange bindings to just redirect some of the traffic. I don't know if you've tried that as well.
We have.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, I think I would say, consider customizing the exchange. Yeah.
Okay. And with the path that we currently have, where we're editing bindings to do filtering, are there any gotchas that maybe we haven't come across that we should know about?
No, it should be fine because performance at that level is it's been highly optimized. So when you say you're changing bindings on the fly, so basically during runtime, are you saying your logic changes during runtime and you have to do some filtering on the go, or is this something that you need to set up at once when you? Yeah.
It's more of like we work in a sports domain, so it's like, hey, we want to turn football on for this customer, so we click a button and football data starts flowing to those customers.
Okay. No, then that's fine. I think support for bindings and the reason why you should be able to set up bindings both on the application side is for you to be able to carry out such logic, right? So just to customize routing dynamically on your exchange level. Yeah. So I think that approach is fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Fantastic. So I don't see any further questions via the Hoover app. Is there any questions from any of the group that wants to? If you can raise your hand, or since most of you have your cameras switched off, that might be a bit difficult. So let me ask a question. So and this is for Karl. Just with the recent sort of takeover of Pivotal to VMware, has there been any sort of change in the sort of development strategy? Is anything new plans, anything that you can sort of talk to around that?
Yeah, some, inevitably things will change a bit. I think VmWare are investing quite heavily in RabbitMQ. Our team is growing. There will be a lot of new stuff coming, and that's a great thing. I think with higher investment comes higher expectations as well. So yes, things are changing in that direction, but I think it's positive. I think it's Rabbit will still stay open source, really works hard on that side of things, as well as working on commercial extensions and that side of things as well. But Rabbit stays the same. So.
And let me see while we're waiting for other questions to come on. So I've got a question from Conrad Taylor. Do you want to unmute yourself, Conrad, and ask that question?
Sure. Well, I guess like in general, I haven't basically, I've seen RabbitMQ around the internet, and basically, I always see it like in relationship to Kafka. So I've tried Kafka, and basically it's not a very good experience, especially if you don't have, I don't know, maybe like 32 gigabytes of RAM or even more. Being that they have like, many different things basically running on your system. That's how I was definitely, looking at possibly, playing around with like RabbitMQ, being that I'm sure it's like a bit more memory efficient. Thus, I was wondering what would be, I don't know, a recommended way in regards to like getting started with it. And basically, actually, like doing something. I always like was thinking about basically doing something like building like a simple like microservices architecture where basically I use like RabbitMQ as like a message bus. So that's kind of like what I'm thinking about. I don't know if there's like a good walkthrough on how to basically do something like that, or basically if there's like a tutorial on basically like how to use like RabbitMQ as opposed to like here are some docs, basically understand what each one of these functions do, and basically kind of like figure it out.
Sure. Sure. So I can answer some of that question. I mean, RabbitMQ is a really mature product. I was just looking up some of the history, and I can't believe that it's almost 12 years old. So there is tons of documentation and use cases that have been done. And one of the beauties of I think Rabbit and why it continues to be popular is it's really easy to get started with. To get started with, to start slowly, and then sort of adapt your designs. And certainly from Erlang Solutions perspective, we see a lot of customers start with Rabbit, and they almost fire and forget their Rabbit implementation. It runs in the background, and it's almost forgotten about. And then it sort of grows and grows in the background, and then suddenly it stops working because the original design doesn't sort of fit the purpose, and the companies are reminded to re-look at architecture. So certainly that's what we've seen from our experience. Ayanda, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think what you said, John, is basically it. I mean, Rabbit is quite easy to get started, but what we've noticed is installing RabbitMQ creating queues, publishing messages, consuming messages at the beginning can be quite straightforward. But the moment you now want to handle other cases, that's when it starts getting a bit complex. So yeah, so like you mentioned, you want to build a microservices architecture. Yeah, so even things
I want to
like
start off simple.
yeah, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, the moment you've got multiple applications which now want to interact, you have to do a lot of planning around the routing and you know, how you're going to structure things, and high availability is another big thing. You know, if you want to set up your RabbitMQ installation across multiple nodes. So yeah, that's when it gets a bit yeah, there's quite a lot, but yeah, like John said, there's all of this is well documented. I think Karl and his team at Pivotal, well, sorry, VmWare have been doing a great job with the documentation, and yeah, and I think there's some talks as well on yeah.
I had like a
Yeah.
okay.
So I mean, it's
I
interesting.
have like a quick follow-up question.
Sure.
Where basically, I mean, do you have like an idea in terms of kind of like how well does it work with like something with you know, like Kubernetes, basically in that space, or basically is there like you know, like Docker images for it? I haven't looked. Where basically you can basically use it like in a Kubernetes cluster. I mean, is there like any information around that within your documentation?
Sure. So, Karl, is that something you can talk to on the Kubernetes side?
Yeah, absolutely. We're part of our team is investing very heavily in the Kubernetes side of things, and there's an open source operator, the RabbitMQ operator, in the RabbitMQ organization on GitHub, which
Okay,
which you should look at. That's
great.
That's what we use and we'll be using. So yeah, definitely take a look at that, and we're definitely working in that space.
Oh, great.
Quite intensely. So it's definitely the way things are going, it's heading that way. I just want to add on to your previous question. Yes, obviously the to getting started, the tutorials on the RabbitMQ.com websites is a good place to start. Once you do come towards production readiness with something, if you get that far, we do have a simple production checklist which you definitely should check out. Just for now, be aware that it exists.
Okay.
But and remember to kind of go through it before any, and it will kind of save you a lot of heartache. I mean, in terms of, you know, if memory use is concerned, then there are many tweakable parameters and settings and things that you need to do, policies need to set on queues to make sure that they don't use unbounded amounts of memory and things like that.
Just following on, thank you very much, Conrad. Just following on, we did anticipate some sort of Kafka-esque sort of comparison towards that. I mean, Karl, when you get those sorts of questions, when somebody's trying to make a sort of a decision at an architectural level about whether it's, you know, Kafka or Rabbit, you know, how do you approach that age-old debate?
How would I approach it?
Yeah.
Well, I developed RabbitMQ. I don't actually use it anymore. But well, I mean, everyone needs to kind of look at their needs. I think RabbitMQ for me is extremely flexible. So the likelihood that you will be able to do what you need to do when you're starting out something new is very high. Like it can cope with the uncertainty, because you don't know quite what it is. You know you need messaging, but you don't know quite exactly what kind of messaging you need and what properties you need and what kind of routing you need and what you can kind of you know, you might not even know exactly what it is that you're building, right? Things change. So I think RabbitMQ, because of the flexibility, because of all the protocols that we support and all the plugins, it's a safe bet in that sense. Now, Kafka is very good at certain things, and you know, that's, you know, streaming analytics, very high throughput, all those scenarios where you have, I'd say, more specific use cases. And I think if you need Kafka, you probably know it. You probably know that you need Kafka, or you come to realize that you need Kafka. That can also happen. And that's not a bad thing. You need to choose the right technology for your choice. But yeah, that's what I said. If you're uncertain, take a punt at Rabbit, and I think it will work for you probably.
Great, thank you very much, Karl. So we've got another question that's come in from Oldham. Forgive me if I only got your initial. Do you want to ask your question?
Everybody calls me by my initials. We are looking at NATs in addition to RabbitMQ. I wonder if you know anything about NATs, and if you could give us a quick comparison.
Ayanda, I'm going to ask that question too. So he has a fairly broad spectrum, but Ayanda, is that something that you've had experience with?
Yeah, I mean, we've come across NATs, but I think the projects that we've worked on is with clients who are transitioning from NATs to RabbitMQ, and yeah, so not much experience with NATs itself, but yeah, in terms of some of the use cases and just the reasoning and logic around building apps around RabbitMQ, or some of the motivators for switching from NATs to RabbitMQ, right? So yeah. Yeah, so not much experience with NATs itself, yeah, but yeah, we've been involved in migrating apps from NATs to RabbitMQ, yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about what were some of the reasons people switched away from NATs to RabbitMQ?
I think the main one was just on the protocol level of using AMQP, like something standardized and an industry standard, which has been evolving on its own. I mean, and RabbitMQ just being an implementation of a solid protocol, meaning there's a lot of, I guess, integrity around that, and yeah. So yeah, and even like I said, building apps on especially the MQP 0.9.1 version, which is the default version supported by Rabbit. Yeah, there's so many use cases that can be handled with that MQP protocol. Yeah. So and then again with the flexibility of RabbitMQ, extensibility using all sorts of plugins, right? So if, like, in case you want to switch to MQP 1.0, all of that is already supported in RabbitMQ, and yeah, and support for other protocols like MQTT, and yeah. So the main factor was on the flexibility of Rabbit, and I guess, yeah, rapid application development on bringing up apps that can start interacting using the MQP logic. Yeah.
Great, Karl.
That's helpful.
Great, Karl. Is there anything on your radar with NATs at all?
I mean, we keep an eye on NATs, of course. They do some exciting stuff. I think where I've seen NATs, and NATs was used inside Pivotal as well back in the day. It's more like kind of like around the edges, or the edge of your architecture, like an edge messaging system. But I mean, they're innovating. They're adding a lot of new features. They're working hard on that. I think you need to look at basically what it is that you could probably do a lot of things with NATs that you can do with Rabbit, and vice versa. What advice I'd give is just look at what's around it. Look at maturity levels. Look at backing, support. See where it's going to be. Look forwards, and then take your pick.
So just on a more broader question then, there's lots of message brokers out there. From VMware's point of view, who's on your radar? What kind of feature? Are there any particular features that you see in other messaging brokers that you think Oh, that's something we should be thinking about. Is there anything like that that um, impresses you guys from what's in the marketplace, Carl?
Well, I mean, one thing that Rabbit isn't able to do at the current version is what's becoming more and more ubiquitous is the kind of the replayable log abstraction, or the stream, as people are sometimes referring them to. So that's something that Rabbit can't do. Rabbit can't do, for example, replay on messages. You know, if you consume a message in RabbitMQ, it's destructive, it's gone, it's deleted. So that keeps your disks nice and full, not full, but full of capacity. Whereas, but there are things that you can't do. But we are addressing that for the forthcoming release. I know you want to talk about that later, what's coming in the future, John, but we are working on a very similar abstraction for RabbitMQ to come in the next minor release. So that's something we looked at. Apart from that, I don't. It's not a lot that we see. There are messaging scenarios that we want to support better, but it's, to a degree, it may become a matter of making changes to what we've got to make sure that they can handle modern messaging use cases better and better, such as kind of device-based IoT, that type of things. But we continue to innovate, but there's nothing in particular that I think other messaging system has that we must have right now.
Okay, so while we wait for some other questions to come through, one of the sort of missed features that we've had a prior discussion about was this better disaster recovery. Often, you know, we're seeing Rabbit now in cloud solutions in data centers or in a sort of multi-center data center installations. What are the plans around that? Carl, is there any features that we should know about?
Yeah, so RabbitMQ has got an open source edition, which has got almost everything. And based on that, we got the commercial edition, which has got a couple of additional features. And one of them is what we called schema replication. So it's a feature whereby the entities in RabbitMQ, the exchanges, the configuration, the users, all those things can be replicated to a remote disaster recovery site. Although, so you have the same system available to you, because Rabbit is designed to change dynamically. You know, you declare queues and bindings and stuff, but dynamically it's designed to handle that kind of thing. And then this gets replicated to a remote site. We also do work in the kind of data replication area between multiple data centers. So that is something that's also will be coming.
Fantastic. So I'm not getting very many questions via the Hoover app. So I'm assuming that either individuals don't have it open or haven't found it. So is there any other broader questions from the group? Do unmute yourselves and ask. Otherwise, I will ask a question.
I have a question about RabbitMQ and Nerves integration. So I've done RabbitMQ with IoT, like outside of Elixir, it works. But have you guys seen any gotchas with Nerves? You know, is there anything on the Elixir side that come to mind?
Ayanda, you want to?
So basically on Nerves, are you referring to using interacting, getting your firmware to interact with RabbitMQ directly from your devices? Or
yeah, that could be one option, right? Like I want RabbitMQ to be the intermediary, right? It did like the message broker, right? And that's it. Like it does the connection management, right? All that jazz. So
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, you can definitely use RabbitMQ, but I think the moment you start going for nerves and you know, getting devices interacting with Rabbit, I think MQP payloads can be quite big for such use cases. So I suggest maybe you look at even switching the protocol, right, using MQTT.
yeah, MQTT.
Yeah, there's for that.
Are you guys looking at other protocols like, you know, I don't know the docs on top of my head, but, you know, CoAP, are there any other new types you're supporting down the road?
Yeah, there's a plugin for CoAP. So basically, it's a matter of just, you know,
Okay.
Yeah, packaging that, installing it, and it will just open a port. Yeah, which will.
And it's been blessed by to work with Elixir, right? Like an Elixir backend on the other side, like the Elixir client. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of, we've built a lot of systems around RabbitMQ using Elixir, right? And I think the main Elixir client, MQP client, is running on top of the Erlang client, right? Which is maintained by the core team. So so that whole stack is it's well supported, and
Okay, thank you.
Great stuff. So we've had a question come in from Nicole Lau. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask that question?
Yeah, I just want to ask, is there a way to reorder the queue? Basically, I just want to have a specific message to the start of the queue, but right now, I just need to basically empty the queue and push that message to the front and then reorder the rest. I just wonder if there's a way to do it without having to go through all this.
Ayanda.
So basically, yeah, I mean, so with message ordering, right? I guess that is basically what you're looking for, right? Yeah, there's some. So RabbitMQ does support message ordering, but only under certain circumstances, right? So you have to set up your installation in a certain way, and your queues and your bindings. I don't know how far you've gone with using RabbitMQ and the whole terminology, right? So you have to set it up in a certain way to have guaranteed message ordering, right? And there are things like so basically, for instance, if your RabbitMQ nodes hit a memory alarm, right? It will get into a phase where it starts paging messages to disk, right? And that can have an effect on your message ordering. So things like that you need to be aware of. So there's quite a few items that you need to consider, but it is possible, and it is documented on the RabbitMQ documentation. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Ayanda.
I think Karl wants to add something there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is exactly your use case, but the classic queue type, the standard queue type in RabbitMQ supports priority queues. So you can publish a message with different priorities so that they are reordered based on their priority rather than the order they arrive at the queue. So I don't know if that's helpful to you at all.
Got it. And is there a certain version I need to be installed to make sure that I have this functionality?
Priority queues have been around for a long time. So a recent version is always what we recommend anyway. But yeah, get a 3.8 version.
Good. Okay, so moving on, we have another question from C.R. Oldham. Do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could comment on good ways to recover from split brain in a RabbitMQ cluster.
Karl, do you want to take that one on?
Good ways. Yeah. There's only one way really, and that's restarting your app, right, and get it resynced. That's unless you're opting for the auto heal mode, which isn't safe, but at least it gets you back running again. We are working on this as a as we have been for some time, we're still working on replacing the internal metadata store with something that is more capable to cope with poor network conditions.
So yeah, this is a topic that often comes up for Erlang solutions as well, on the recovery side of things. Ayanda, do you want to speak to some of the experiences we've had on that?
Yeah, I think with recovery from split brain scenarios, so we look at it at two perspectives. So one side is obviously recovery. The other side is trying to put in place guarantees that in case you get those net splits, you're sure that you're going to be able to recover your nodes, right? So it's quite a challenge, right? But even on the application side as well. So if you use things like publish confirmations, right, then you'll be guaranteed that all messages that are being published to your clusters are guaranteed to be written to the queue, right? And in case there's a net split and the message cannot be traversed across to other nodes, right, you get a failure on the application side to replay that message or just to back it up somewhere. So there's quite a lot of strategies around that, and and some config and algorithms that you can switch between. I think Karl mentioned auto heal. So there are other strategies as well that you can play around with, basically it's working around the cap theorem and what you wanna gain from that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can I just add one more thing? I've mostly talked about the kind of the metadata side of things, the internal database side of things. But yes, so the new in 3.8 queue-type quorum queues is a replicated queue type that is much better able to cope with network split scenarios. As long as you have a quorum still connected and running, it will continue to operate. And it doesn't require a lot of synchronization, which with the classic HA queues, a net split may cause them to need to resynchronize some of their replica members, and quorum queues typically don't do that. They would only ever resync the delta. So I would recommend using them if as well for these scenarios.
So we have another question coming in. Zaki, do you want to?
Yeah, just a quick question. I recall, my documentation skills. I don't know where all this stuff is sometimes. Have you guys looking at new quality of service stuff? Right. That's I don't remember the standard names and stuff. I recall you guys at RabbitMQ having just 5 queues, right? Are you guys making any improvements on that, or is it still 5, or is it changing?
Karl,
I'm not sure what you mean by 5 queues. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so quality of service, you assign different queue priorities, right? So you have priority 5, priority 4, 3, 2, 1. At least this is when I was using RabbitMQ in production. And we would have our own quality of service running, and the data would go through different, that's what quality service does, right? You want to get voice and video interactive traffic on a different queue on a higher priority, and then other like transactional on another queue. I know this is coming from the networking world, but just thinking out loud, have you guys the reason I asked this question is in context to IoT devices and things like that, right? Like IoT devices. So imagine I have an IoT device on a street lamp, and that street lamp is producing control traffic. It's producing, let's say it's got cameras, video traffic, and it's got a bunch of other sensor data from pollution scanners, right? Sensors. So now I have 3 different or 4 different types of traffic, and I want to use MQ, RabbitMQ as sort of my broker. Like, how do I you know, is it one broker per connection, or is it like, like can I leverage the quality of service built into RabbitMQ today for that?
As far as I understand, I'm trying to kind of translate what you're kind of describing into what we've got. So RabbitMQ's a broker, you can run multiple queues, right?
Yeah.
Inside a broker. So you could assign each of the incoming kind of events to be routed to one or more queues, depending on how you want to kind of route things internally. And they're all coming in on their own connection, or maybe they're coming in on the same connection if you've got multiple kind of things that kind of congregate somewhere else. But there is nothing to kind of what you do with those messages once they're in the broker is maybe where you would kind of prioritize processing of certain events over others, but that's an application concern, not something that Rabbit would handle for you internally, because obviously it's running on the beam, right? It's fair sharing, right? It's everything is roughly equal. It gets an equal time slice of the scheduler time. So all queues will run with the same priority, if you like, internally. However, what you do with the messages, you might let certain messages queue in one queue, and whereas you empty the others, right? Depending on what you find is most important. And if you put them all in one queue, you can use priority queues, but I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend multiple queues.
I was just trying to see if there was something I didn't have to do on the application side. It could be taken by RabbitMQ. That way, like I know the queues or the markings, right? The quality of service or QS markings are retained from the end device to the upstream devices. But I was just hoping that if RabbitMQ had a mechanism where it could create that for me, I just wanted to ask a question. I know it's a dumb question, probably. We're just thinking from an architect design.
There's also things like consumer priorities as well that you can incorporate. So I think like Karl said, internally Rabbit treats each queue the same basically. Then onto your application, how you want to prioritize the data in the different queues.
Consumer priorities run inside for a single queue. So if you've got multiple queues, yes, it will broker the messages, but it won't tell you applications that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, the final question, Karl, do you what's coming up in 3.9? If we've got about a minute or so, can you sum up?
So the main thing that's coming up in RabbitMQ 3.9 is the new stream queue type, which is not a queue per se, it's a stream. So it's a replicated log structure which allows you to read messages very quickly, publish messages very quickly, use very little memory, everything is on disk, and you can replay and put checkpoints where you are in the log and so forth, which a feature you've probably seen in many other messaging and streaming systems, but now it's coming to RabbitMQ. We got some very good performance out of that. It comes with AMQP support and all the other protocols, as well as a custom protocol, which is where you're going to get the real speed through.
And when is that actually scheduled for?
It will be out this year.
Okay.
we are we haven't really agreed on definite things. I think it might be out sooner than you think. Apart from that, Erlang 24 support and Erlang logger, but that's just boring internals, although 24 is obviously very exciting for everyone because everything just went faster.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, everyone. Sadly, we've got to draw this session to a close. It's fantastic to see so many people. When we discussed it, we thought, okay, maybe one or two people might be interested, but it's been a good crowd. I hope you guys have found it useful, and do reach out to the organizers as well. if you'd like to hear more about Rabbit in any future events.